Hello and welcome to the Emotional Work Podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human condition. And today is our final episode in our 3-part series focusing on the imposter phenomenon. And we've spent 2 episodes so far looking at what the imposter phenomenon is, and looking at it very much from that one-to-one manager relationship. And our recurring guest, Hanne Vincent, is back with us today, but we've also got someone else new on the podcast. So we're going to have a different voice in this episode too. So let's get our 2 guests on the air. So first of all, Hanne Vincent. Hi, Hanne.
Hi, Phil. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you? Welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Oh, glad to have you as well. And then from the Emotional Work team, we've got Gabby Williams. Hi, Gabby.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Very excited.
Good. Me too. Today's going to be, I think, a really interesting one. So before we get into the podcast proper, though, because we've got a new guest on, I think it's only appropriate that that we get to know our guests again through the use of our innocuous questions. So our unexpected yet innocuous question today is: what skill would you like to learn? So what skill would you like to learn is our innocuous question for today. Now, for me, it's magic. I love magic, card tricks in particular, and I would love to learn how to do card tricks and magic. I think it would just be so much fun to do. Whether I'd have time to learn it is something else entirely, but that would definitely be a skill that I would love to learn. I would love to be able to do kind of sleight of hand. Not that the audience can see my hand movement. Anyway, I'd love to do sleight of hand kind of card trick magic. So that would be me. That would be the skill I would love to learn.
Is that a childhood dream then? Lots of little boys playing with that.
No, actually, it was something. I think it came from my kind of journey into the world of deception, really. So when I think I was like, I don't know, late 20s, early 30s, when I was kind of, I'd started my quest into emotions, and then often that quest takes you into the world of deception, because we try and hide are our feelings. And then it was a discussion and a debate I had with someone about whether magic is deception or not. Because if you were to look at it, like the dictionary definition of deception is an intent to mislead, intent to mislead without prior notification. So without letting somebody know in advance that they're being deceived. So for example, when you go to see, I went to see a production at the theatre last night, and I know that the lead actor on stage, or the person playing the lead, isn't that actual person. So they're not, as I went to see Elf the musical last night, that person isn't Buddy the Elf. But for all intents and purposes in that example, they are. So they're not deceiving me, because I've already been told that it's not. And with magic, right, you know you're going to be tricked. And so just got me really interested in it. And then and I love watching it. You know, if I'm going to get lost on YouTube, I can get lost in Penn and Teller Fool Dust videos and places like that. Yeah, I love it. And I took my daughter. I took my eldest daughter to see Darren Brown earlier on this year, and that was amazing as well. So sorry. Anyway, magic for me.
Yeah. Wow. Well, for me, I think it would be something a bit more practical, and it's improving the skill rather than learning a new skill. I like to sew, and I have so many projects that I start, but I'm actually not very good at it. So they just end up in a cupboard waiting for me to finish it. But I love to be good at sewing and be wearing the clothes that I have in my mind and that I envision. They just never come out the way I want them to. So yes, if I had time, I would definitely want to improve on that one. That would be a big one. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be an incredible skill. I think when I was in Cubs, I had to sew a button onto something to get like my sewing badge, and I think that's the extent of my sewing. I probably could sew on a button, and that would probably be as far as I would, as far as it could go. So no, the idea of actually making clothes, that'd be amazing. That'd be brilliant. Gabby, for you?
I think mine's a bit of a boring one, but I'd love to be able to cook much better than I can now. I want like more recipes and more fun things to make because I'm very bad at cooking at the moment. Yeah,
Okay.
more exciting foods for me to eat.
What's something that you would like love to cook that you just feel would be like so far beyond your skills at the moment? Is there like a dish that you're like, oh, yeah,
Oh,
I'd love to cook that?
well, I don't know. I think it's baking. It's like all of the different cakes and stuff that I could never be able to cook, or it's just all very technical. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So cooking, I love. Baking, I hate. Baking is just
Mm.
far too precise. Like you've got to be very exact in your quantities. You can't mix and match your ingredients. Um, so yeah, but
Just put
cooking.
lots of sugar in there and it will be fine. That's my
Yeah,
approach.
exactly. All of the sugar. All of the sugar. Okay. All right. So for this final episode in the series, then we want to, I guess, take a probably maybe we're summing up what we've looked at so far, but all the conversations, Hannah, that you and I had, I think we focused on the how imposter phenomenon can show up for individuals, what managers can do to help and support when somebody is already in a job or in a role, whether already in an organization. And then I think for today, I think we're looking a bit earlier in that process, aren't we, in terms of thinking about how might we attract or recruit or maybe welcome those with imposter phenomenon into a company or into an organization. But I guess to do that, the creation of a culture of interpersonal trust and psychological safety is going to be important. And Hannah, is that something that you'd like to just tell us a bit more of your thoughts on?
Yeah, so like you said, and I think in the previous episodes, we really focused on how managers can work with members in their team that suffer from imposter feelings and how they can get the most out of these people. But I think what's important also to look at is look at it maybe from a broader perspective and look at the role that is set aside for maybe HR or senior leaders in how to create a safe place at work in general. So it's, I would say, all about fixing the workplace rather than the person. And so yes, creating a culture of where people can feel safe is so important, and it might sound a bit fluffy and a bit woolly,
Oh, not at all.
but environments where employees feel easily judged, where there's a very high focus on individual performance, where people need to shine individually, that's an ideal breeding ground for imposter feelings. And the price of such a culture can be very high. It can stimulate anxiety, high stress levels, burnouts, etc. Because people are afraid to show weakness or vulnerability, and they're afraid of making mistakes, of being unmasked. When we talk about the masked employee image, so a place that offers psychological safety, where people feel safe to take risk and try out ideas, is really important to get people to function at their maximum potential. And there's actually been some research in that. I think it was Google that did some research to look at the link between psychological safety and high performing teams. So they observed over a couple of years, they observed a number of high performing teams, and they did some questionnaires and statistical analysis on them and tried to figure out what were the predictors of their performance. And one of the most obvious predictors that came out is that the teams that work very well together and show high performance the main predictor is actually psychological safety. So when people feel safe within their team and they feel like they're not easily judged and they can make mistakes and they can try out new things, they feel safe to do that. That's a one-on-one relationship with the performance of its team. So it's not just a fluffy thing. It's a really effective team to make a team performing well. So that's a really good thing. Now, how do you do that as an HR team or as a leadership team? That's not easy, but there's a couple of things an organization can do, and that's show that it's okay to make mistakes or to be vulnerable. It could be, for example, senior leaders talking openly about mental health, for example, or about, how they're sometimes afraid to get it wrong. That's really impactful. Showing that everybody struggles. There could be workshops around, blameless learning, around also exposing biases within teams. All these kind of things can have a huge impact and are things that are, I think, set us out really for the leadership and for HR to work on in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely, Hannah. I think that's a big part of why emotions aren't discussed in the workplace, where that feeling of psychological safety is absent.
Exactly.
The then having the confidence that you can say, I feel really nervous about taking on this project. I don't know if I don't know if I'm capable of doing it, or I'm really angry about that decision that we've taken to move from X to Y, because I think it undermines our, what it is we're trying to achieve and what we're trying to do. And so for somebody to feel comfortable and safe enough to be able to express those feelings, it requires exactly what you're describing there, that culture of psychological safety. One of the things that we as in emotional work have been working on over the last probably 18 months or so is a blueprint for high performing teams, in terms of what are some of those components, what are some of those aspects that we need to have in place in teams that allow those teams to be psychologically safe, and then goes on to allow them to be high performing. Because what we found similar, we did a similar literature review to what you described. So we just went to look at the Google research. We also went to the peer reviewed research as well to say, right, what are some of those things that what are these components or these elements that make up for high performing teams? And then we've been road testing it with 2 different clients over the last 18 months to see, what kind of impact does it have, where these things are in place, and then we're comparing that to what the team was like prior to our kind of intervention to see how impactful that can be. And what we're finding is that yes, absolutely, the senior leaders have a role to play. The HR team or the people function similarly have a role to play. And I think what's been more impactful though is the way that the team engage with each other in it. So it's very much that social proof aspect. So what you mentioned before about a leader saying, I just don't know. I don't know if we can hit this goal. So we've set ourselves this target. We've set ourselves this goal that we want to hit. And the way we're acting at the moment, I just don't know if we're going to get there. And I'm really nervous because if we don't get there, I feel like, my credibility is going to be at risk. And I feel like my reputation is at stake if we don't get there. And I realize that what that's been doing to my behavior recently is making me really grumpy and making me really short-tempered and intolerant of mistakes. So when we've not got things right, I've got really angry with you as a team about it, and I want to say I'm sorry, because that doesn't help us. Actually, that doesn't help us get where we need to go. And that was a meeting I facilitated with one of the leaders in the team, not the most senior leader, but one of the leaders in the team and the rest of the team around it. Because if we can't have that vulnerability, which you discussed earlier on, and we can't have that openness, and we can't have those opportunities to express how we're feeling, then the chances of the team being high performing are just really slim.
Exactly. That's interesting. Yeah. And I think there's still so much hesitance or shame in doing exactly that. Whereas it creates this high performing team spirit, and I think especially in a lot of multinationals, there's still this really high focus on individual performance, but also universities. I think, I don't know, uh, maybe in journalism, these kind of professions, there's such high competition levels, and this focus on individual performance destroys a lot of this trust and this atmosphere that needs to be there for people to thrive. So it's a contradiction there, of focus on performance. And this focus on performance is actually going to reduce your performances within your team. And that's sometimes really difficult to grasp, I think, for a lot of people in these organizations, and especially the leaders, that they don't always realize that they're harming the performance of the team by being this superpower, or the image of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come to Gabby in a second to ask, what your experiences might be in terms of, I don't know, teams or teams or occasions where you felt safe, and how that's kind of impacted how you feel. Just before I do that, though, I wanted to add that I think sometimes it can feel really big. We might be talking about a multinational company as a whole, and trying to affect change across a massive kind of company like that can be quite tricky, because you've got all these kind of micro cultures within it. And I think for the listener, then it might be thinking about, yes, can we do it on a cultural level across a company? And it might be about, how can I do this in my team? So what is it that I can do in my team to create that psychological safety locally, with my immediate people that I'm working with, even if I can't do it across a whole company? If we can do it in a team, I think that's also a really important step.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Gabby, just wondered if there's something you're thinking or feeling or would like to add.
No, I mean, I think having the ability to make mistakes and kind of ask questions without being judged, and knowing that actually, you've got that safety of it doesn't matter, I think is really helpful. Yeah.
Because we have it at Emotion at Work.
Yes. Yes, we have it at Emotion at Work.
Well, I'll tell you what, if there's one place that you'd hope it'd be in place, then
yes,
Emotion at Work would be one. So that's true.
It definitely is. Okay.
So we talked about that, kind of creating that culture of interpersonal trust, psychological safety. Also, though, I think what we're aiming to do with this series as a whole, and also I know, Hanne, what you're looking to do with the audio, so the audiobook that may follow, is about raising awareness of imposter phenomenon as a phenomenon in itself. And is that, again, something you'd like to just speak a bit more about for me?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really basic one in the whole conversation around imposter phenomenon, is the need to raise awareness around it, to bury it in a way. Because remember, we talked about around 70% of people having experienced or regularly experiencing these feelings. So it's really quite common, but it's rarely a topic of conversation in companies. And so, it really all starts with raising awareness and making it a topic of conversation. Could be through, an informal lunch and learn session, or an awareness week around imposter phenomenon with posters on the wall, or again, senior leaders talking about it. And if there's one important aspect of making it known and raising awareness, I think it's especially important to do that within the line manager community, so that they are they're aware of it. They're handed tools to work with people that experience these feelings. So really, I think it's crucial that everyone who manages anyone should be aware of this thing that is imposter feelings, and what it means, and how they can manage it. Why not, include it in every new manager's introduction training program? It really should be a part of it, and I think it rarely is at the moment.
Well, hopefully with this series and the extra work that you're doing, Hanne, we're taking some really good steps to doing something about that and addressing it. So yeah, definitely.
Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move then into the more specific aspect that I mentioned earlier on, in terms of how might we attract, how might we kind of recruit, select, and then welcome people in a company or in an organization in a way that would support those that might have imposter feelings. And I think, Hanne, we'll come to you first for a bit of introduction, maybe as to why you think that's important, and some suggestions that you may have. And then Gabby will come to you afterwards and start to find out a bit more about the research that you've been doing, if that's okay. So Hanne, let's come your way first.
Yeah. So that's a really, really crucial aspect of making sure to include, or to not be mindful about people that have these imposter feelings, and especially in the process of looking for a job and applying. I mean, there's huge peaks of these feelings, because you actually have to prove, I have to prove what I know and what I can do, when I'm actually not convinced myself I can do it, and I know how to do it. So that's just a really, really big challenge for people with imposter feelings, and I can totally testify to that myself. It's just so awkward when you have to do interviews and apply for a job and come across really confident, when you're just dying inside and you feel like you just don't have the right to be there. So yes, and there's been a lot of research on how different profiles respond differently to certain job postings. And for example, funny, I thought quite funny, there's one study that showed that men usually apply when they meet around 60% of the qualifications in a job ad, whereas women will apply only when they meet 100% of them. So it will be the same for people with imposter feelings. They will look at a job description and cross out everything, all the criteria that they don't meet, and walk away. So imagine, the people you are missing out on just because of how you write your job ad, and it might be very tempting, for recruiters to make a whole list of wishes and qualifications you want people to meet, but you have to think of how you can scare away certain people in doing that. And so an important first step really is to, I think, trim down your job description to the core, and cut out any nice to haves, or if there's any nice to have, make sure it's specified that they are nice to have, so that you make every qualified people feel welcome to apply to a job. Yeah,
definitely.
So I think Gabby's work here, and going to Gabby, I think she did some interesting research on exactly what's the impact of all these qualifications in a job ad to young people applying.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And Gabby, I'll come your way in just a second, if that's okay. So I think so we recruited for a social and community manager back in February 2022. And this was something that I was really aware of when we were putting together the role profile and the job description and those things. So we made it clear in there that, so for example, we said we're looking for someone who loves social and community management, but doesn't need to know everything. Someone who's knowledgeable enough to contribute to the development of a strategy, and is experienced enough to implement it. Someone who is happy to use or willing to learn these particular tools. So we didn't say like you have to be proficient in MS Office. We just said, you need to be happy to use or willing to learn these things. To make it as specific enough that somebody can make a decision to go, yes, I think I'm interested in that, or yes, I'm willing to do that, but not so stringent that somebody might go, oh, well, I don't have that, so therefore I can't apply. And that in a way that made our lives a bit harder, because we probably broadened the level of applications that we received. So we got lots of applications in. I think it was 200 and something that we got in. And we, was it 200 something? I think it was. Anyway, it was a large amount. And we made the commitment to give feedback to everybody. So we told them if they weren't shortlisted, we told them why they weren't shortlisted. And if they were shortlisted, we told them why they were shortlisted. And the responses that we got then from people to say, thank you for having such a practical and a supportive approach to doing it, and for letting us know, because most companies would just go, oh yeah, if you don't hear from us within 2 weeks, you haven't got the job, good luck. Whereas we were like, no, well, that doesn't help anybody. Actually, that just creates a degree of anxiety where it doesn't need to exist. And I know we're not necessarily talking about imposter phenomenon, or I'm not talking about imposter phenomenon specifically here, but I think that I agree with you completely. Taking that approach, I think, is good for everyone, including those that may experience imposter feelings, rather than having an approach that might work well for those that don't have imposter feelings, or might have a particular set of preferences in a particular way.
So, did you find somebody qualified and
absolutely
the right mindset then?
Yeah. So we, so a lady called Lizzie, she joined our team back in, it's January this year. And yeah, she's been fantastic for us all the way through. And there was a couple of other things that we did as we worked our way through. So for example, when we got to the final stage, so we had like 3 stages. So we had the application to be shortlisted, then we had an interview, and then we had a presentation followed by a kind of a meet the team, a wider interview. And so when we got to that presentation phase, we paid all of our candidates for the work they did, because we asked them to do a piece of work to review what we do at the moment and to give their recommendations and suggestions as to what we should improve or what we should do better, which essentially is consultancy work. That's what you ask a consultant to do. You say to somebody, review what we do and give us your recommendations as to how to improve. So we paid all of our candidates to do that piece of work for us, whether they got the job or not, because again we felt that was the right thing to do, because otherwise we're getting all of this free consultancy, and what does the individual get for it? Well, they might get the job, but they also might not, and we just didn't think it was fair to ask them to put that work in without giving them some kind of payment for it. So we paid them all £200. So we paid them £200 for their work.
Wow, interesting approach.
Yeah, well, we definitely worked for us. We got a great person as a result. So yeah, really happy.
Excellent.
Okay, all right. So Gabby, I know that for you, your research was around factors that might influence people applying for a role. So why don't you tell us a bit about what you were researching and what you were trying to find out?
Yeah, so I was researching imposter phenomenon in people aged 16 to 18, because I thought that was, prime time when like people are getting their first jobs or their first couple of jobs, and kind of what experiences they might have with that. And I thought imposter phenomenon is one of those things that might come out in that kind of age bracket. So yeah, I wanted to know about the factors that go into applying for jobs and then how they're affected by imposter feelings. Okay.
So it's probably a good place to start then with those factors, if that's okay. So what were the factors that you were researching and looking into?
So I looked into pay and wages, ease of application, flexibility of hours, the contract length, the distance that someone has to travel from their home, the effort needed to learn any new skills required for that job, and then whether there was a specific industry or sector that people were interested in.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And I know you're currently authoring a white paper that we'll put out that will kind of list all of the findings. So we might not be able to get into every single bit of detail within there today.
Yeah.
What we'll also do for you, fair listener, is we'll put a link, either a link to kind of the dummy survey, or we'll put a PDF of the questions that we asked in the survey in the show notes for this particular episode. So if you want to know exactly what we asked, and if you were furiously scribbling down those different factors that Gabby was looking into, then fear not, fair listener, because they'll be available for you in the show notes. Okay, so we were looking at those different factors then. So those 8 factors in terms of things that might influence the extent to which somebody might apply for a job. And then we were comparing that with, or correlating that then with imposter feelings. So how did we establish the extent to which somebody might have imposter feelings?
So we included a link to the Clance imposter phenomenon questionnaire, which was done by Clance and Imes in their research into imposter phenomenon. So at the start of our survey, everyone filled out that questionnaire, and it gives them an imposter phenomenon score. So basically tells them kind of how much they experience feelings of imposter phenomenon.
And again, for your benefit, fair listener, we'll put a link to that Clance and Imes survey into the show notes as well. So if there's something that you're interested in doing, then we'll put a link in to do it. So before we get into your findings, though, Gabby, so we're interested in 16 to 18-year-olds. So technically, especially within UK law, that means they're not an adult. So what did we do from a welfare point of view? Because I guess what we needed to be conscious of was that we didn't, what am I trying to say? Let me try that one again. So within UK law in particular, 16 to 18-year-olds then are not an adult. So we had to think about their welfare. So what do we do to support the participants' kind of understandings of imposter phenomenon and their welfare within it, Gabby?
So I went into the school I conducted the survey in, and I did a presentation for them, basically outlining what the research was and kind of what imposter phenomenon actually is, and helping them to understand that it's not a medical condition, it's not a medical diagnosis. Everyone has those feelings, and it's actually just kind of the extent to which someone feels those feelings. And we gave them some resources that if they wanted to look into it more, or they felt like they would have needed some help with it, they had those resources to then go and look at afterwards or before if they wanted to.
Okay, wonderful. And and so when you gathered the data, was it just from one school or one sort of establishment?
Yeah, so it was the school that I was in locally, and we got about 200 respondents. So yeah.
Okay, so decent sample size then. That's good. All right. And then what did you, so we're looking at 16 to 18-year-olds. So before we get into the comparison with, or the correlation, sorry, not comparison, the correlation with the factors to which to apply for a job, what did we notice about imposter phenomenon and age?
So imposter phenomenon and age was linked. Hang on, let me start again. So we found that age and the imposter phenomenon score were linked, and we found that 16-year-olds had the lowest levels of imposter phenomenon, which potentially could be they kind of haven't gone into the experiences like work and had those feelings come on. So it might be that they've not experienced it yet. But yeah, 16-year-olds showed the lowest, and kind of as it went up through the age range, it increased. So 18-year-olds showed the highest levels.
Did you
I
also,
want,
if I may ask, did you also find a correlation with gender?
Yes, we did. So we also found that overall women imposter phenomenon. So we had 20% of the females that were asked were in the 80 plus score of imposter phenomenon, whereas only 2% of males scored in that category.
Wow, big difference.
there's a big difference. So it might be useful then, Gabby, just to let us know what those categories are. So you mentioned the 80 plus category. What were the other categories?
Yes, there was less than 40, 41 to 60, 61 to 80, and then 80 plus.
Okay. And the range then is about the frequency and the intensity of the feelings. Is that right? So kind of like less than 40 is, I don't tend to feel this very often, or I don't feel it very intensely. And then up to 80 would be the other way, where either I feel it intensely and or I feel it regularly.
Yes. Yeah. So people in 80 plus have it frequently and in lots of intensity.
Okay. I wonder, I guess I find it interesting about the increase through age, 16 to 17 to 18. And I think the point that you make about it could be that at 16, I can't say everybody starts work because that would be inaccurate, because some people might begin working earlier than 16. But I guess as the older you get, the more experience you have in the workplace. I guess imposter phenomenon isn't necessarily just about the workplace. It could happen. It could happen in sports. It could happen in education. It could happen in different settings. So, Hannah, might you have any kind of working ideas as to kind of in this data set, we're finding that 16, 17 to 18, it progresses in terms of the frequency that people report experiencing imposter phenomenon. As to what might be behind that, do you think?
I mean, intuitively, I'd think that the older you get in that age bracket, the closer the reality of having to actually find a job and performing and keeping a job, and it just, I think, becomes a little bit more real at 18 rather than at 16. I think when I was 16, I wasn't thinking about those things. Whereas once you're 18, you're an adult, and now you have to, playtime's over, and it becomes a bit more real. So that's intuitively what I would think and how I would explain it.
Okay. Maybe Gabby, that's one for your next research project.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked about imposter phenomenon scores by age and by gender. In terms of the factors then, so the factors that might impact people's application for a job, Hannah mentioned, and then I elaborated on the kind of the process that somebody might go through to join a company or to take on a role. So what did you notice about the application process?
So I found that people tended to, in the less than 40 group, so the people that experience not much imposter feelings, I found that they tended to rate quite low, whereas in the 80 plus group, they rated it really high. So they really valued having an easy application process.
Okay.
And what do you mean with an easy application process?
So they valued having kind of something simple and something easy to follow, rather than potentially kind of falling at hurdles throughout the process.
Okay.
So it might be about the number of hurdles that are in the way, and or I guess the accessibility of the role, or how accessible the role may feel within that then. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we've got so if I was to visualize a bell curve then, so what we're saying is if they report strong imposter feelings, they rated the importance of the ease of application higher. So if we took the imposter phenomenon kind of comparator away, how did that data look just generally? So when, in terms of what might that distribution curve look like if we took the imposter phenomenon bit out?
So without the imposter phenomenon, it was a normal distribution. So kind of low at either end and then kind of a spike in the middle. Yeah, so a very normal distribution. But then when you add in the imposter feelings, it kind of spikes up of people with the high imposter feelings rate it high and they want an easy application.
Okay, so it skews that data very much to the right. So instead of it being that standard bell curve, it's skewed to the right hand side. Okay,
yeah,
that's really interesting. And I guess that could be because if we think about the classic kind of Clance and Imes definition that I know, Hanne, you talked about in, I think it was episode 1, around feeling like a fraud, fearing that people will find out that you're not as competent as they might think you are, and then feeling like you're not a success despite evidence to the contrary. It could be that that I suppose that in particular that bit about fear being not as competent could tie in with that ease of application process, especially if it links back to what Hanne was saying earlier on of having a long list of essential criteria and those kinds of things. There could be some correlation there, do you think?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. Yeah.
Okay. And was there something in your data that surprised you? Do you like it when data surprises us? Was there something that surprised you?
Yeah, so when I was looking at the link between the effort needed to learn a new skill and the imposter score, I kind of thought going into it that people with a high score would indicate that the effort needed to learn a new skill would have a high influence. But that really wasn't the case when we actually looked at the data. So we found that we found that people in the 61 to 80 category, only 21% of people rated effort to learn a new skill as a high to kind of a 4 or 5 influence. And then people in the 80 plus category, only 15% of them rated it in the kind of 4 to 5 high influence. So yeah, I really thought that would have had more of an influence, but actually it turns out that even people with lots of imposter feelings actually don't really mind learning new skills.
Okay, wonderful. Fab. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And was there something else then? Something else or something more from your findings that you think that you'd like the audience to hear? As I said earlier on, there'll be the in-depth or the full report will follow. And when we publish that, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Something else or something more, Gabby, that you wanted to share today?
I mean, my main kind of biggest finding I found was actually that there was a correlation between the imposter phenomenon scores and some indicators of imposter phenomenon. So the indicators come from the Clance and Imes definition of imposter phenomenon. So that's things like feeling like a fraud in what you're doing, feeling like people will find out that you're not as competent as they think you are, and then also feeling like you're not a success despite actually evidence otherwise. So we basically found that people that were in the low imposter phenomenon feelings, so the 40 or below, they didn't really feel like a fraud. They they kind of attributed their success to themselves, whereas people with the high imposter feelings, so the 80 plus category, actually did score highly on all of these indicators.
Wonderful. So that gives us some good confidence that in both the validity and the reliability of the data that we're reporting then. Yes,
definitely.
Yeah. Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you. Coming your way then, Hanne, is there, I guess there's an element of a so what from that then. So what I suppose where I want to move next is into what my Let me try that one again. What might be our recommendations for our listeners who might be managers in organizations, or they might work in that people kind of HR profession? So when we're thinking about the individuals that may experience these imposter feelings, and thinking about that attraction, recruitment, selection, and welcoming, what might be some of our recommendations for them?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. In general, is just be mindful of the reflexes of people with imposter feelings, and how just be mindful of these feelings as not to exclude them but proactively. So there's a couple of things. So we've talked about how you write your job description or your requirements. Make sure to make everybody feel welcome, and don't make like a huge list of requirements that might scare people away. There's also, because I was thinking of that when Gabby was talking about people leaving school. I had a discussion with a friend a while ago, and he explained to me he was working at a large multinational, and they were looking for new graduates to apply. So they were targeting universities, and they did a first wave of application, I think around March or something. So before students had actually graduated and gotten their diploma. And what they found is that in that wave of selection of recruitment, they really attracted a pool of very confident, mostly male students. Whereas in the wave where they recruited, I think end of June or beginning of July, when people had actually graduated, the group of applicants was a lot more diverse. And so that's also an example of things you need to take into account, is that, people with imposter feelings, or that are maybe less confident, might not apply in March when they're not yet certain that they will actually graduate, and they don't feel confident enough to apply. So it's a silly thing, but it's these kind of reflexes that companies need to have when they're in their recruitment process. And then there's a last thing that I would like to point out, and that's something that I feel very related to, is be mindful also of the imposter phenomenon when reading through a CV. It's hard to, there's this huge fear of overpromising that people with imposter phenomenon have. And so I remember vividly when I was, writing my CV at one point, and I'd included mostly like dry descriptions of this is what I've done, and this is the size of the business that I've managed, and function title, just very dry things. And my partner said, he read it through it, he said, no, you have to include your accomplishments, market share growth and successful projects and targets you delivered. And the mere idea just made my stomach turn. I could not write down my accomplishments because I didn't believe that were my accomplishments. So that's very important to keep in mind when you read through a CV and compare different CVs. It's not because somebody doesn't put all of their accomplishments on there that they're not very valuable people.
Yeah, I agree. So one I think I'll add, which I think will support those that might report having high imposter feelings, and I also think would support everybody in the recruitment process, which is when it comes to an interview, letting people know in advance what they're going to be interviewed on and what they're going to be interviewed against, and ideally sharing the interview questions beforehand, because it helps people prepare, and it helps them get ready, and it takes away some of that anxiety around over preparing. I remember, Hanne, in one of the previous episodes, you mentioned about how you used to kind of over prepare and just kind of because you have to plan for all possible eventualities so you don't get found out. Whereas if you know exactly what you're going to be asked and you know what's going to be coming, then that can certainly make that process more relaxing and more engaging which allows the individuals
Absolutely.
to represent themselves in the best way possible. So
I think that's a very good point, actually. Yes, it takes away a lot of anxiety, and it reduces the chance of of a panic reaction, or which a lot of people with imposter feelings will be familiar with. So yeah, absolutely, very 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 good point.
okay. And then as we start to come to a close, then. Gabby, is there something that you would add in terms of the recommendations or the ideas for people to think about from either from your experience or from your findings?
No, I mean, I agree with both of you. I think that having an easy application process, potentially making it like very clear what the stages are and what is expected of them at each stage, I think is really important. And also making it clear that, of those list of requirements that you put out, actually making it clear that you don't need all of them. You can learn a new skill, because like my research has found is actually people don't mind learning a new skill, but it has to be made clear that actually they don't need it going in. It's they're allowed to have that time to learn it. They don't need it straight away, right off the bat. So I think, yeah, having a really clear process.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you, Gabby. So what we'll do shortly then is we'll move into our kind of closing aspect, where I'll ask both Hanne and Gabby what's something that surprised you over the course of either gathering your data. I know, Gabby, we've heard of one surprising finding for you from you so far. And I'm not asking about a finding in particular, but something that kind of surprised you as you were working your way through your research. And then Hanne, is there something that surprised you as we've recorded this series? I think it would be a nice way to kind of bring it to a close. Before we get there, though, for you, fair listener, as we mentioned earlier on, one of the focuses for emotional work is about our blueprint for high-performing teams. So if what you want are teams that are psychologically safe, that have a constructive culture where emotions can be expressed, and teams that are high-performing, then get in touch with us or get in touch with me at phil@emotionalwork.co.uk, and we can share the blueprint with you, and we can talk a bit more about how your teams can be high-performing. Okay, so let's go. Gabby, can we come to you first, if that's okay? What surprised you?
I think just how imposter feelings translate across everyone. Obviously, there's been lots of research in like older people that are already in jobs and have already had jobs for a long time, but actually it translates across everyone, and in young people as well. And just, I think it's surprising and interesting how everyone feels it. And actually, I think it needs to be more talked about and more focused on.
Wonderful. Fabulous. And another plug for your paper that will be coming soon as well, because I think that would definitely help. So yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. And Hanne, what surprised you?
Well, I agree with Gabby. For me, when I first started looking into it, one of the first things I read was about how widespread it is. So that was really, I think a lot of people don't realize that. So that's definitely one. And then I wouldn't say surprise, but as I was working through the whole paper and thinking about it and coming across tips and tricks, and it just surprised me how much it is out there already, and it has been written about it, and there's so many useful things or tools and tricks for managers out there, but they're all over the place, I would say. So, and there's not it's rarely ever gathered together and presented to new managers. And I think, yes, that for me is the eye opener, is that so many people have it. There's so much written about it, but I've never come across any kind of training or discussion at my workplace. And that's something that I would love to see changed.
Wonderful. Fantastic. In which case, then I will say, Gabby, thank you so much for sharing your findings, sharing your research, and coming on the podcast with us today. Hannah, thank you so much for coming on for the last 3 episodes. It's been wonderful to have you with us, and it's been great to hear your experiences, hear your insight, and to have your voice on the Emotional Work podcast. So, thank you both very much.
Well, thank you, Phil, for having me and showing the interest. It was a real honor to be on your podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very fun.
You've been listening to the Emotion at Work podcast, and if you got this far, you must be interested in the role that emotions have in the workplace, either within individuals, between people in teams, or in organisations as a whole. So head over to the Emotion at Work hub, which you can find at community.emotionatwork.co.uk. Thanks for listening.